wake up in the morning, just like you. Put our boots on, just like you.
Here we go.
Work for our money,
My
just
name's
like
Kelly
you.
Turney. I'm from the Omaha, Nebraska area, and I'm a Christian. I play bass in a Christian punk band or an oi band. We're called the Bricks. We're out of Omaha, Nebraska. Uh, I also run a multi-genre record label called Raven Faith Records. Many styles, but they all have one mission, and that mission is to share the gospel through music. And we kind of have what I call the Renaissance mindset is um, we use music to set the standard. We want to preach and teach and build relationships with people, not just in the church, but outside the church. So most of my bands that are on the label play in bars and clubs and festivals and as well as the church. Why? To build relationships and to share their faith and their gospel because they've given their life to this style of ministry. And I've learned real quick that the music ministry of bands isn't really looked upon well. So my job is to try to encourage them, but also get them heard. And um, as a Christian, I used to be a pastor, and also I was in the full time ministry for about close to 20 years. And then I did parachurch ministry working in Omaha with at risk kids. And now I'm doing the record label. Christ has called me in a lot of different directions, but with one purpose to share Him. Uh, Music has affected my life from an early childhood. My parents were musical people, not meaning they necessarily played music, but we always had music on somewhere, either in the car, in the garage, in the house, in the kitchen, almost more than the TV. One of my first gifts that I really remember receiving was a Fisher Price children's turntable where you could play real records on. And I still have the image of it in my mind, but I started listening to everything that I could find in my parents' vinyl collection. Everything from C.W. McCall to Johnny Cash to bands like Boston and geez, just everything you can think of. My parents were into, and um, not only that, I really learned quick that there's a community around music that you listen to a certain style of music or a certain genre, you begin to dress like that and talk like that and hang out with people that have the similar taste in music. And pretty soon, if you're going to concerts and stuff, you're getting to know people. My parents like the kind of the country or the outlaw country stuff, and we would go to different concerts and we would go with people that we knew. Um, one of the one of the other early childhood memories I have of music is we used to go camping with a group of people back in the day, and they would set up their band and play. My favorite thing to do during the weekend was just to watch them play. And I sit back and think about all the cover songs that they did, and I was just blown away by the audience that was just drawn into them. They would dance, they would listen. They just always intrigued me, and music has just played a big role in that in my life as we've gone through that, and just through high school, driving in your car, getting ready for a football game, getting ready to study or whatever, just kind of getting your mindset right and getting you going. But the biggest way music has affected my life was it introduced me to who Jesus was. Even though I was a person that went to church my entire life, I really heard the gospel through different music groups. Like, you're probably gonna laugh at this, but people like DC Talk and their album Heaven Bound, and Petra, of course, and Whiteheart, and bands like Vengeance Rising and stuff that just opened my eyes to people that didn't look like the church, and they were singing and they were really preaching and sharing their idea of the world, which is God's idea of the world. and it transformed me. But one of the biggest things that music does for me currently is it keeps me sane. You know, how the world's spinning out of control, but music just kind of keeps you focused. But that's what it does for me. Music brought more music, or the songs or the artists brought me to get to know Jesus better, brought me into a relationship with Jesus almost. Not that I went forward at a concert or anything like that, but just buying the CD, or back then it was a cassette tape, and just popping them into the stereo and listening and just wearing tapes out. And back then it just wasn't, Jesus was the middle 80s, you know, you had to go out and search for music, and you get to know people behind the counters and things like that, and they're seeing you what you're buying and things like that. It's just really interesting. There was this band, they're called Vengeance Rising, and they had a really, Dave probably remembers this, but they had a really kind of controversial cover. It was like a half a skeleton and half of a man, and they had to put a sticker on it to sell it in Christian bookstores, or Christian bookstores wouldn't buy it or sell it or whatever. And the first thing that I would do when I saw that was I bought it, just because what's the message behind this? What are these people telling me? You know, and basically it was just, Jesus, it was thrash metal, you know, and they were just preaching the gospel. It just kind of blew you away that through this music, and the church was kind of putting a halter on it because of the artwork. But geez, back then it was just amazing to see that. But now when I either listen to music, I've been talking about that a lot, but I also write music and I write lyrics, and I kind of write them in the same way. I want to show my emotion and my view, which should be God's view, because we're Christians, that the world looks at relationships this way, or it looks at divorce or alcoholism, or just my job, keeping a job, losing the job, the hardness of just getting up in the morning. We have songs like that all over the place on the Bricks albums, and songs about unity, especially right now in our country. We need unity more than anything. I mean, before we were talking about, before we started the interview, me and Dave were talking about just the unity of just the different people on college campuses, and in the city where I live, everybody's separated by what they think is right, and nobody will sit down and have a conversation. They're scared of each other, and we need unity. We need to go back to maybe the way it was, where we're standing in a concert or in a mosh pit or whatever, and somebody gets knocked down, you pick them back up. There's something special about that, and I want to promote that more than anything. So the Bricks sings a lot about unity, and it's unity through Christ is some of the really the place where we're going with it. And I always say, find good bands and listen to them, you know, and share them with people, you know. And the cool thing now about like Spotify and Apple is they make playlists for you every day of the stuff that you're listening to. It's automatically generated, and sometimes they'll introduce new bands to you. And I don't know if you're into playlists or whatever, whoever's out there listening, but take a look around you're paying for Spotify or you're paying for Apple Music. I know that every day I can wake up in the morning and I can flip on this when I'm on like my Apple Music playlist, my daily mix, I think it's called, and it will play some of the artists that I've been listening to throughout the last week, and it'll also give me some artists that sound like them, and just opens my eyes up to new bands and new ideas and new sounds, and it's pretty incredible. But as far as anything else, listening to some Raven Faith Records bands would be really good too. We're all over Spotify and Apple Music, and Dave will have all the links to everything included with these videos. And but the biggest thing is RavenFaithRecords.com, and it'll take you everywhere you want to go with us, and you can get in contact with me.